Welcome to For the Record, which is a conversation series where we talk to music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's great to have you here, David.
Great to be here, having me.
Uh, Absolutely. As I always like to start at the beginning and just get a sense of you, who you are, where you're from again, and kind of the origins of your relationship with music.
So my name's David Moses. I'm currently living in Los Angeles. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, like from here. Um, yeah, uh, I've lived a bunch of different places around the world and on the West Coast as well. Korea for Seattle for a time, Bay Area, but been calling Los Angeles home now for about 5 years. Yeah.
Cool. And um, at what point did music become a part of your life?
Music became a part of my life pretty quickly. Pretty musical family. Um, more so on my mom's side, she had music part of her life. Grew up singing church choir. Uh, knew how to play piano, flute, recorder. Very into the recorder. So music, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in a public school system where music was the class that I took since kindergarten.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, always there. I started playing violin in third grade. Piano lessons starting around the same time, and got my first guitar when I was 11 or 12. Um, but really, where it all kicked off was when I started first getting my pedals around 13, 14, and then like that's I would say that's when it really like got me like hooked. I realized like music can be. I mean, I always enjoyed playing and like learning songs, but when I learned like music could be sound design
Mm.
as well, I started to like. I didn't really know it at the time. I couldn't conceptualize it, but was really just enjoying like seeing uh, what like the combination of the guitar and the pedals could could do. That infatuation kind of slowly built over time. Say,
Cool. Yeah, no, I remember the first time, that I got an amp and playing around with the guitar and just, making these small tweaks like, well, damn, that's a crazy sound. That's a crazy
mm-hmm.
sound. I want to keep, I'm
Yeah.
not going to play this with that crazy sound. And you can just kind of go on forever.
Oh yeah, it's endless. I like bought a whole bunch of pedals all at once. I had like
Mm.
a gift, a certain money given to me at a very surprisingly, and I just blew it all instantly. It was like supposed to be for like college fun, but I just spent it all on like buying like a pedal board uh, of like Boss pedals because that was like the only kind of pedals that I was like aware of. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like it was before kind of like now there's like bespoke pedals are kind of just like a seemingly a normal thing. I kind of had my mind blown. So I had like one small guitar shop growing up in my town, and like it would be mostly like the name pedals like Digitech and Boss and that kind of stuff. You wouldn't really see much more of like maybe some electro harmonics. You wouldn't see much of like the bespoke things. But now back to my small town of Hummelstown, and there's like super bespoke guitar shop with like very rare expensive pedals. I'm
Wow.
just where is the market for this? In my small town, am I unaware of something that's happening here? But I don't know. Part of that I think is just maybe that uh, it's something I've just noticed within music, probably because more accessibility designers, pedals and synths, so maybe more in like the general. I don't know. That's just my theory.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, speaking of Hummelstown, being, being a small town boy myself, I'm curious to hear like what you were listening to growing up, like what, through which modes were you consuming music? What were you consuming? What was inspiring you to, spend all this money on guitar pedals? Would love to hear about that.
Yeah. I was fortunate, I think, a couple things. There was a really good record store in my local mall, which I really wish I remembered the name. Couldn't. I was trying to like recollect it. Uh, yeah, sadly, that's lost to me. But yeah, I was in like the CD era also,
Hmm.
so like there was a couple like really good things that, or fortunate things that, like growing up in an era where I had the accessibility to the record store, like 10-minute drive from my house. Um, Also, like burning CDs was a very common thing. Um,
Hmm.
Limewire
Hmm.
also, and Napster. I was of that era where it was just like all of a sudden, you the friend who had to use it, you just give them a list of music you wanted, and they would get it back to you.
Yeah, it's
Um,
incredible.
and there was a good local scene as well. Central PA actually has like a long history of like hardcore and punk, and like almost like every region had its or every like county seemingly had its like community center that also doubled as like the punk venue
Cool.
as well. So I started going to shows. I remember like going to my first show at like 13 and just feeling like so blown away by what I was seeing. It was like a couple punk bands and a ska band.
Hmm.
I think the ska band was called like Bilbo Baggins or something like ridiculous like
Amazing.
that. But yeah, just the energy of that, and like sharing like, and I quickly like realized like part of my identity, or something I attached my identity to as a kid, was my interest listening to music and sharing what I liked and what other people liked, burning for people. Um, uh, oh yeah, even like prior to that, like recording, I had like a tape cassette recorder that could pick up the radio and you could record directly from the radio on tape.
Hmm.
Uh, I was doing that for a period of time. That didn't take off as much as burning, um, buying the record store, or eventually downloading like in huge quantities. Yeah,
Yeah, I remember those days well.
the
Uh,
halcyon days. Yeah,
the halcyon days of,
yeah,
yeah, Napster and LimeWire.
yeah.
But I mean, there were, eh, yeah, of course, it was also problematic, the fact that we were stealing music, but the fact that we're still, a connective, thread. I feel like there were, still communities that rallied around, these technologies, the peer-to-peer sharing aspect, the, going to your friend to ask them to burn you a CD, aspect, and connecting through that. I still feel like, even though there wasn't any money being exchanged, that was benefiting the artist, was still benefiting the artist more, given the connective threads that were being built, than like, the streaming ecosystem, which, uh, sort of lends itself to, to more isolated consumption, and, most artists aren't really getting paid anything anyways.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm I don't do that anymore. I don't download music
Yeah.
illegally anymore, and I don't think I really like, when I was young, like understood what I was doing. For
Sure.
me, I
Yeah.
was just like, you know, it was kind of like this big sort of unlock moment. Like you go to the record store, and um, it kind of taught me like how to like look for like the catalog of the artist. It's like something you don't consider like at that time, because the context just like show up at the store, and then like, oh, this is like CDs that they have, and it's like that's your reference. But all of a sudden, like on the internet, oh, they have like a bunch of records, but it's not at the record store, and like I guess like I could have asked the store to order the CD for me,
Yeah.
but the temptation and the ease was right there. But yeah, there was this like conversation that could get going. It was like asking my friend who wasn't into punk uh, at the time to download songs. Like he kind of opened his mind up to
Mm-hmm.
uh, some music, mainly punk and emo. That was a lot of emo, like late 2000 got stolen by
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
totally. Um, what I'm curious to hear, like, if you remember the first album that that you ever purchased.
Oh yeah. It was Blink 182. Oh man, what was it called? It was the follow up to Enema of the State. So
Uh-huh.
my sister had Enema of the State, so I was just like had access. But whatever the follow up album, clearly impactful because I can't remember the name
I
of it,
can.
but I do. I think it's a quick Google.
Yeah, that's what I'm
If
doing
we
right
need,
now.
yeah,
Uh, so it must have come
I
out
think
in
it's
like,
called "Take Off Your Pants and It,"
oh, take off your pants and
something like that.
jacket.
Yeah, something like that.
uh, it may
Very
have
Blink
been.
182.
There was also one just called Blink 182. Is it the one that had like like I Miss You on it, or was that maybe after? Oh yeah, I think it's
Oh
Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. It's Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Yeah, 2001.
yeah, yeah. That was my first owned CD. Oh wait, though I definitely had Dookie by Green Day on cassette before then,
Mm.
but that was like gifted to me. My next door neighbor had that, and I feel like I remember saying like he didn't like it as much, and he just
Huh.
let me have it.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
so yeah, like my first ownership was like pop punk, and being like 12, that was like the coolest music
Yeah,
for me.
totally. Same. Yeah, I think Dookie was one of the first albums that I had as well. I remember just I remember the album art being very iconic, even
Yeah,
before I had it, or at least it was iconic in my head. I think it is, actually iconic, but it was like it was iconic in my head. It was one of those things that I really wanted to have just because it was really recognizable at the time. I mean, I also think it's a great album.
it's a classic. Yeah, that's the one with like there's like a bomb going off and like a lot of um,
Right.
just like animation
Yeah.
happening. Yeah, those are my first, and I remember like being obsessed with them and like calling friends trying to like convince them to like listen to some of these. Like it's like you got to hear this music.
Yeah. Hey man, what's up? You want to listen to Dookie?
Yeah, totally.
uh, do you
Yeah.
do you remember, besides Bilbo Baggins, do you remember the names of any of the other, like,
Oh
punk
no, I
bands, local?
no. No, that's the only one that stuck with me just because I was such like a Lord of the Rings nerd as
S-
well growing up.
Same.
So yeah, yeah. So that I can't forget the ska band, a little bit back. No,
That's
I
cool.
well, um, I remember like the first band that like blew my mind uh, when I was a kid was a band that work Dab the Matador. Um, it was like during that era where like like disco indie punk was kind of like being revived.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like that kind of like seeing that band that kind of had that like dance like sort of energy put in with like punk style guitar playing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like for me I felt like I was experiencing something completely novel, and it was experiencing that was like I think it was like 15 or 16 probably when I saw them at a local community center venue. Um, and I remember it felt like just completely novel. I didn't have like the context of like music from like the late 70s that like forged that kind of disco energy with with punk. But I don't know, that stuff like just didn't matter at the time because it was novel. Because like for me,
It was
for
new. Yeah.
context, yeah, it
Yeah.
was new. I also remember like the drummer of that band like opened for them solo with like a loop station. It was just like him looping his like voice guitar, and that was like another mind blowing like unlock moment, being like, oh wait, you can do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
You can just be this like old and be the experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
Um, cool. You know a bit more about your own music making and your own, pursuits, and then like, if you could talk a little bit about, some of the other music that has been in your life that, that has inspired you to explore certain, certain aspects that has for whatever reason worked its way, into your creative process. What are, some of the other, I guess, kind of unlocks that over time.
Yeah. I guess I'll start by tying in with two bands that were really important to me in my musical journey. So definitely, and two guitarists who were very inspiring. So around like 16, 17, I discovered Radiohead and Wilco.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, I remember, hearing a computer for the first time around that time. Had it on a burned copy
Mm-hmm.
on the Civ. That was my car at the time. Uh, and then had a friend burn me a copy of Ghost. Uh, those two records, especially the opening tracks on those records, like both had like really incredible guitar work. Um, I'm not sure if Ghost is Born has Nels. Pretty sure it's Nels. Either way, like that, I can't remember if Ghost is Born has Nels Cline as a player. I'm pretty sure it is. Might be
I think
wrong.
so.
A lot of Wilco heads are gonna be like, ah. But there's like that has like this explosive guitar solo in it, and it led me to Nels Cline, which then led me to like Sonic Youth, and
Mm-hmm.
like later on like Glenn Braca, and like more of that like late '70s experiment our work that focused on Sonic experience rather than playing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so definitely a bridge Nels Cline, and Wilco a bridge abstraction. Are of course Johnny like just an incredible. I mean, he's a fantastic player. I've seen watch how he plays, but also like pedals processing, and yeah, I remember hearing guitar in that context was like, oh, this is what I want. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I play guitar, this is how I want to play it. I don't care about shredding, any of that kind of stuff. Like there's different, like you can get like so much sound by just acting like what your pedals, how you're playing, delays or grounding things, reverb. So yeah, I kind of started to like define that style for myself, and then when I went to school in Philadelphia and got involved in a couple bands. Um, uh, there was a band called Holly Billaday that we were kind of more like bar indie rock, but
Yeah.
the guy whose band it was like cool with letting me just like put in like more like spacious and kind of spacey elements. So I was kind of like the lead guitarist, but doing a lot of like textural stuff with the guitar. Um, Over kind of like I would say if you heard Doctor Dog, the
Mm-hmm.
band
Of
Doctor Dog, I think
course.
like
Yeah.
yeah, and we were from Philadelphia too, so I think it was a lot of like inspiration style. And I had with my roommates, we had a band called Work, uh, where it was instrumental and of more like having those elements factor. Guy who playing like a synthesizer, a drummer, bassist, and guitar, doing textural and stuff. I didn't really call it ambient at the time, but like I guess it was kind of playing sort of, yeah. So that was kind of like my foundation. Um, those bands didn't go anywhere, but it was like a good kind of stepping off point. And then I started getting into making music on my computer. Um, started like experimenting with DAWs. I used one MIDI keyboard, and then just like a personal thing. And was maybe a little after college. I discovered Brainfeeder and got really
Mhm.
into like Flying Lotus,
Mhm.
Sam I Am, like Stone's Throw. Like started figuring out about all this like West Coast beat making stuff. And also Philadelphia actually have like two legends. Well, one guy's from Jersey, another guy's from Philadelphia. Knowledge and My Design. My Design was from New Jersey. Knowledge was from Philadelphia, and they were, man, I can't remember names, but they used to like it was like every Thursday night they would like, or every third once a month every Thursday they would roll up to this bar in South Philly and just like play like unreleased beats. So I started like
Cool.
kind of hanging out there and listening to that. So that started to inspire me, and like started like experimenting with beat making. And it was much more of just like kind of a personal thing. I was like, dropping things on SoundCloud, had a band camp and stuff like
Mhm.
that. It was very kind of like naive in the best sense. I was just sort of having fun and like putting. I moved to um, Asia in my mid 20s. In Korea, I was just kind of started like there's a big, much more influence in Korea from England and Australia, which had like more connection to like club scene. So like I got introduced to like deep house, and just house music in general, and experiencing there's clubs, um, sorry, in Korea, and met a guy from Australia who was like very connected. He was a DJ within Korea and uh, so he kind of I bridge Adam bridge in that world. Then I moved to Vietnam, where I was like kind of like being like, well, I don't know anything about the music scene here, and I was kind of in my mind being like, it's probably like just gonna be on like the back burner. But I lived in Saigon for 3 years, and like a wellspring for music. There was this guy named Jace Wynn who still lives in Saigon. Born in Saigon, but went to school in Australia and got into making when he was living in Australia. And I'm not sure if he still has it, but it was called the Beats Saigon,
Hmm.
where he was beat makers from a lot. He had a lot of connection with beat makers in Japan and makers locally, China, sometimes from England. So yeah, there was really good, usually like monthly shows put on by him. There was two dudes from England who had like connection to Boiler Room, who had a place like so like more like exposure to, like house like that. And that's where I started collaborating with this guy Leonard Ramsey Rudd. He was from
What a name.
Portland. I know you got to say the full name.
Yeah.
Really good friend of mine and bandmate for 3 years. We I just started like making music with like a kind of like a garage rock band when I first showed up. But I was doing things on my computer and a MIDI keyboard, just kind of making like sounds. And he saw me
Mhm.
and approached me after and convinced me to do like an improvised set with him at this bar. And he brought his like SP404 sampler, and I was just like playing synths through uh, Ableton. But it gelled, and we went on. We had a very shared love of Animal Collective, and
Mhm.
started
Oh,
making
man.
music kind of
Love Animal
in that.
Collective.
Yeah, we were starting to make music in that vein, um, very free form, and textural, and yeah, we had like a microKORG. Uh, an SP404, an Oasis, um, big Oasis sizer, and we were just kind of like pulling things together. We called ourselves Space Panther, and
Nice.
but it ended up being like, yeah, just there was a bunch of venues, a lot of people interested in music. There was like a local music scene with the expats and Vietnamese. There's a guy Dan Win there who's pretty awesome guy who's like really great beat maker. And now he has like a show on NTS where he's finding wave. Does like a huge wave and a monthly show there. So he was there at the time, and yeah, it all kind of culminated with just it was sort of right time, right place. There was this dancer, Emily Navarra, who was living there at the time, who noticed what Brian and I were doing and really liked it, and brought us in on this project called The Legends of Vietnam. Uh, like the Shell project was called Standpoint Theories. This one was called Legend Vietnam, where she secured funding from the U.S. consulate and like brought together French, Vietnamese, American artists, um, and we made this project where we reinterpreted uh, 6 mythical origins of Vietnam through
Whoa,
electronic music.
cool.
We had this Vietnamese folk singer singing. There was a visual component, kind of these projected stories and dancers as well. Yeah, so we had small run of that. We did it in this big shipping warehouse that was converted into um, a venue by this Australian guy named Rod. We had it in the theater for a while. Well, uh, yeah, so it was cool. It ended up being like really, it was totally unexpected, but it ended up being a very good life living there.
Cool.
And
Cool. And
then,
that,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm taking you
Go
through
ahead.
the whole arc of everything.
I want
I
it.
moved, yeah. So that was like mid to late 20s, and when I was in my later 20s, I was like going through this kind of like decision making process of like, do I stay in Vietnam and let this be my life, or do I move back to the United States? And I decided like I wanted to go back to my home country, but ended up moving to the West Coast, not back to Philadelphia. So I lived in the
Hmm.
Bay Area at a time, and it's funny, kind of going through this like thing of like do I pursue music as the career and like try to get into a graduate program, music technology program, conventional, um, which I ended up choosing like the at least job wise, paying the bills wise, choosing the more conventional route, and I
Hmm.
eventually got into a program to be a school counselor, which I do professionally
Cool.
now. And in my mind, when I was working on it, so I ended up in San Diego actually for the program that I was a part of, and I was kind of like, need to put music on the side. I'm focusing on being a counselor now. I need like getting this aspect of my life sorted out. Um, that only lasted for about a month. Within a month, in this like small shared room or shared house situation that I was in my tiny room, I figured out how to like set up like a small setup for myself. But I
Hmm.
had this kind of like it's funny when I look back at it, it's sort of like a naive or misguided idea. But I was like, okay, like I have no time to make music because I'm in graduate school. So like, how can I make music really quickly? It's like, well, what if I just like collage things together? I don't worry about um, the outcome. I just like take sounds and like push them together and like making ambient music. Like, oh, it's easy. You're just like making sounds. And it started that way, and I found out I really liked it, and it was actually much deeper than uh, I sort of anticipated. And it became like the thing. I started recording um, ambient tracks mainly just in my computer using Ableton, but it just started to really resonate with me. I was kind of finding it to be like it was very personal endeavor. I was not anticipating releasing any of it, but
Mm.
it just felt kind of healing in a way that like it felt like so free form. It's like, oh, I could just make it this way. Like make sounds or gestures or create like a vibe. Well, uh, let that kind of me. I was just kind of like sitting in some of the sonic landscapes that I was making, finding just a lot of satisfaction in it, but never really like knowing like where could this go.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like get into my career and years like sort of finding wasn't until I had this moment after the pandemic where I was debating like, am I going to stay in Los Angeles or leave Los Angeles? Like I didn't really get a good feel for it because, and so I couldn't really much. But there was this period of time where I started getting served music that I was finding really intriguing. One artist in particular, Sam Gendel. You ever heard of
Mm-hmm.
Sam Gendel? Yeah,
I have.
it got
Uh,
yeah, it got served to me, and I was like, whoa, this is like nothing I've ever heard. But it's like clicking instantly. It's like this so exploratory and free, and has a lot of depth to it. But it feels like playful, and I just was like, whoa, this dude's just like releasing like so many tracks on an album. Um, Kind of reminded me of like what the beat makers would do. Like Knowledge would drop like huge troves, and some of it would be like 30 seconds.
mm-hmm.
So it was like kind of seeing like using that sort of framework, but for like I mean, Sam will make like beat kind of driven music, but like not all of it's like that. Some of it's just these like vibes that he captured. So yeah, that started coming up. That started getting served to me on Spotify, and like I ended up at this like it led me to leaving records,
Mm-hmm.
which was just like had so much music on there that I was like, oh my god, like this label's amazing. I ended up at a bookstore, this independent bookstore called Tomorrow Today, um, in East Los Angeles, and I just saw the guy there was selling leaving tapes. So his name is Jeff. Uh, so I just got into conversation with him about that, and he ended up giving me this telephone number, text texted a cloud to it, and it would like let you know like the spot where the show was going to be happening.
Mm, cool.
Um, and ended up in this Japanese garden where Sarah Davachi, who's this like drone organist, was playing, and it was this mind blowing moment because like all these like artists that I was listening to at the time from the LA scene like were like there also. Take this like stuff I was doing more seriously, because there was a community for it here. People were very open and receptive and wanting to hear it. So I had a gig where I was like 6 months. I was for a yoga class, this studio in East LA, and started putting together like from that. Then June I released June of 2023 I released solo uh, album under my name Carrier. Uh, um, yeah, 5 tracks around like 7 to 8 that I taken from the time when I was in class. So it's like very listening, uh,
Cool.
synthesizer based. Yeah, and it's very proud of what I put out. Collaborated with my fiance Lonnie Trock.
He
She's
was
really
great.
yeah, I know who you had on the show.
Yeah,
Fantastic interview.
who has been in the show? She's excellent.
Yes. Callback, a little callback there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Yeah, so yeah, pretty much music's always been, it's a very long answer, but just giving you a rundown of the history. Yeah. And I'm still working on uh ambient music, getting like more and more ambient, like a lot of drones recently.
Cool.
Uh which I've now started to like curiously um release on some like uh web3 platforms. Like I minted started a collection on Zora called
Mm-hmm.
Undergrowths, like with some of
Cool.
these like more kind of like textural sonic landscapes that are sort of like nature inspired. Um, yeah, so trying to like exploring some new territory. Uh, yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, cool. Thank you for taking me on your journey. It was great to hear about all the various chapters in your life. I I must say, I love the name Holly Day so much.
Yeah.
I mean, as a big fan of spoonerisms, it's just it's great. I've been playing around with the name Spruce Springsteen and really wanting to do something with
Nice.
that, which feels in that vein. Uh, and also did not realize that you and Lonnie were engaged. Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
great to
Thank you
hear.
so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, cool. So I mean, at this point, I'd love to hear more about, I guess on the other side of things. I know we've already talked a little bit about who you're listening to, who your inspirations were, but looking at today, kind of, and uh, I'd love to hear how you primarily discover, music that you listen to.
Um, yeah. Unfortunately, mostly, well, I don't know, fortunately, fortunately. Um, uh, Mostly Spotify. Yeah. Or conversations.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the two that I'll or I've since I've been so like mobile in my life, record collection, like physical collection, I'm now doing it. Like there's like a whole bunch of the room. Uh but like physical collection has never really been like a big aspect for me, or
Mm-hmm.
not at least in my adult life. It was when I was a teenager and like moving around a lot. Like oh yeah, Spotify's been really good. I was using YouTube was a really like somewhere around like 2013 and 2015, the algorithms in YouTube were excellent for discovering music. Like you could just find someone who like uploaded a video of like the um I ended up discovering like a lot of like Japanese like pop like at like very small channels with people like uploading videos. Um that would be a source for me. And then just like learning how to, dig through Spotify.
Mm.
And Spotify's like a little onto me. It seems to think that like I do like stuff that's like a little more like off the radar. Um and sometimes it does things that just like I don't know like how much it knows about me, but it seems to like so like I really got into this one album by this duo Salenta and Topu.
Okay.
It's a piano piano cello combination. And I was listening to their hold on, I'm gonna look up the moon yeah, moonrise, moonset, moonrise. Yeah, listening to them a lot. It was like 100 monthly listeners at the time. So I was like, oh cool, like I feel like I'm listening. And then both of them moved to LA. And like
Oh, nice.
met them like a couple weeks later. So I feel like Spotify is like aware like who my friends circle is somehow.
I mean,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's something weird going on. But yeah, I use that, and then there's a couple I'll listen to NTS or Dublab. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with Dublab?
I
Dublab's
am.
like I'm always gonna learn something new from Dublab. And there's some really great DJs on there. I'll shout out Mitchell Brown, goes by Nanny Cantaloupe. He's my
Man, he can't.
absolute favorite DJ. He has the most eclectic taste. Um, like whole like rare ambient to like psychedelic from like the 80s, from like the 70s, 60s that you've never heard of, and um, he's just always. I've listened to his show and seen him DJ a bunch. He's a friend. Always blowing my
Cool.
collection is vast. So yeah, I have this nice balance of like being able to use the algorithm, and fortunate enough to be part of this community in Los Angeles where there's
Hmm.
excellent creators. Uh, so yeah, like there's the contemporary and classic at all.
Yeah, I feel like if you can strike a balance between those two things, I mean, the algorithm and sometimes it is useful to lean into more convenient methods or to use tools, in like in more unconventional ways. I feel like if you really spend time with Spotify, for instance, like you could do a lot of diving and make some connections. And yeah, I mean, like listening, to places like NTS or Dublab, I feel like those are such, good resources for music discovery.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's I'm always gonna learn something I've if I'm listening to this.
Totally. All right, we talked about the first album that you ever purchased. Now that you're collecting records again, what is the last album that you have acquired?
Last album I acquired. Actually, it's funny. It's not in my possession because I bought it directly from the guy at this
Hmm.
house party and then left it at the house. But I'm excited to have it. The This beat maker, Ashtray Jenkins, who
Ashtray
released this
Jenkins.
really awesome kind of IDM ambient, but like kind of classic like LA sort of like beat maker sound, called It's Trash Now.
Hmm.
Um, it's he so there's this like monthly concert put on by Leaving Records in a park in a park. Um, and I just saw him play a set on just an SP404, and it was super engaging. I've listened to the record a couple times, Spotify, but now like a go back to my buddies and pick up. But it's the last record I purchased.
Cool. I mean, and yet another great artist name, Ashtray Jenkins. I
I know
love
it's amazing. Yeah, yeah.
that. Okay, who's three artists of note that you've heard for the first time in the past year or so?
um, Time Warp,
Time
spelled
Warp.
WHARP.
Hmm.
Um, she blows my mind. She like uh is this guitarist, but she does a lot of stuff with synthesizers as well. She's kind of like her music is krautrock inspired, but has like
Cool.
she lives in New York, but she has a lot of that like New York minimalist
Hmm.
influencer, so like Steve Reich and like Terry Riley kind of sounds in
Hmm.
there. But she's also a comedian, so there's this like kind of
Whoa.
goofiness to her music as well. It's like super intellectual and goofy at the same time, which is like it's just really feels like novel and amazing to me because like Reich and Riley are like very heady,
Hmm.
and Krautrock's very serious.
Hmm.
So to like put this like element of goofiness to it, like and make playful, like it's it she adds this like it's like somehow is like there's depth to it, but playfulness to it at the same
Cool.
time. So her recent release, Spiro World, fantastic. Uh,
Spiro
so
World.
yeah,
Awesome. Um, and do you have any others that you've discovered recently that you want to shout out?
sure. Nico Gioris is a pianist who lives California and very like it's like very impressionistic uh piano playing. Uh kind of like taking like sort of like it's like Chopin, but like with this like Americana sort of vibe to it.
Huh.
Uh, just a fantastic player. Like I was fortunate enough to see him play just wise once, and he can just float across the board.
Cool.
And released this really beautiful record called Cloud Suites, where he lives out in the desert, films clouds on uh per day, but he in the clouds. So he like yeah takes the clouds as like the context.
Cool.
Yeah,
I love it.
it's so cool. It's a beautiful record. He
It
also released
sounds
another record called covered Terry Riley's Go and Curved Air. Like he'll work with synthesizers as well. But the B side of that album is two tracks where he uses samples of slot machines from
hmm.
casinos.
Uh-huh.
It's mind blowing. There's this one
Wow.
track, Hot Slots, which incorporates. He figured out like all slot machines are tuned to C because
Huh.
he would go insane in a casino if they weren't all tuned the
Wow.
same. So
Right, that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. So he uses those as a basis and then writes this like very like Harry Riley esque sort of. It's you have to listen to it.
That
Great.
sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a trip. Um,
Cool. Yeah, that
oh
gives
man,
whole
who just mind blowingly amazing guitar
hmm.
bass playing felt like Thundercat, but like a little relaxed and even kind of more beautiful in a way. It's
Hmm.
like feel like these like sort of like beautiful sort of spaces. Uh, yeah, it was kind of one of these things where I felt I was like witnessing someone who's gonna be like a legend later
Wow.
later in life. It was just wow, this guy's like, so so good.
Cool.
But yeah, I don't know if he's released any records. And then uh, they're not like they're not new, but because it's been a collective since like the '60s, but they recently released an amazing compilation of like all like of like tracks throughout the decade. But this group called the Pan African People's Orchestra, um, which like the leader was this guy Horace Tapp, um, Tapp Scott, I believe is his name. Started in the '60s, but they still exist, still
Cool.
music, and
Wow.
it's cool. Like there'll be this like grand collective of like 20 people on stage, or sometimes more of them.
Wow.
Um, yeah, uh, they're just incredible, and it's young and old. It's like very like seeing
Cool.
generations of like individuals have been a part of it, and there's like people as well. Yeah, I've got to see them play a couple times. Very inspiring. Uh, like you know the groups
Cool. I yeah, I mean, to be honest, everything you've just said sounds all right up my alley, and I can't wait to listen to it
again.
after
Yeah.
this. Um, okay, another one for you. Underappreciated artist from your favorite music um decade.
Oh man, underappreciated artist from my favorite music decade.
Yes.
Dang. Oh, that's I had to like think about that one.
Yeah, it's sort of a two-parter.
Shit. That's like hard. That's hard. That is hard. I feel like the ones like I oh, okay. Um I've got one, but I got to like do a little research cuz I'm pretty sure they're from the 70s. Um but I'm going to say Entourage Music Ensemble.
Huh.
Hold
Entourage
on.
Music Ensemble.
Music theater ensemble.
Music theater. Also a
So
great
there
name.
are, yeah, the Entourage Music and Theater Ensemble. Uh, so yeah, they were. I'm gonna use the '70s.
Okay.
I do like a lot of stuff from the '70s. I'm a big krautrock guy. Um, they are. I'm gonna say they're underappreciated too because I'm also very into Fortet, and
Uh-huh.
like a lot of like his iconic songs sample this group. Like if you're
Got
familiar
it.
with
Okay.
Fortet and start listening to
Of
this group,
course.
you'll hear things. But just really like so they were this like group of musicians and theater performers that like just combined those two things. All their theatrical performances had music, and they just did a really good job recording a lot of it. Uh, and just a lot of really beautiful records. They're relatively unknown. Um, uh, yeah, and just really beautiful, spacious stuff, and some more like challenging work there. It's just like very like it feels like experimental and exploratory and very tight at times. So this kind of like playful improvisation you sort of feel is there within the music, but it seems like a group of people who are like communicating with each other as well. So yeah, I'm gonna say them. Yeah, yeah.
That's a great
Entour
answer.
the Entourage Music and Theater Ensemble.
Cool. Yet again, yeah, you've chosen an artist that I'm unfamiliar with, and I am excited to listen to. Especially the Fortet thing will be fun, like listening for little samples here and there that
Oh, you'll notice
I
it immediately
recognize. Cool.
from some of his earlier work, which also makes me like appreciate him. Like, damn, like he was like on the on like the tip of the spear.
Yeah, yeah, he was aware. Um, cool. All right, here's the big one. You're going to a desert island and you get to bring three records with you. What are they?
uh, okay. I thought you were gonna ask this, so I prepared.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Uh, Arthur Russell, World of Echo would be my number one. A huge Arthur Russell stan. Absolutely love that record.
He's great.
And
Yeah.
it's one of the records. Every time I listen to it, I hear something.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so definitely Arthur Russell. Um, Gotta choose a Radiohead album because I love Radiohead. I would probably choose Kid A. Um,
Nice.
if I had to choose one album, if I was just gonna listen to them for the rest of my life, I would either be Kid A or In Rainbows, but I think it was Kid A because that was the one like yeah, was the one that like opened my
Yeah, that feels like the right, right answer. The one that really draws us in the first time, I feel like, is usually the one.
yeah. Um. Oh man, third was I had a hard time choosing
Third
this
one's
one.
always the toughest.
Yeah, yeah. May I mention an honorable mention if
We'll
after?
allow it. We'll allow it.
Okay, cool, cool. So I was stuck between I ultimately went with Dorothy Ashby's Afro harping
Cool.
so much, and it's like an album I could always go back to if I'm like in a bad mood. Just put that
Hmm.
on, and everything feels all right.
Cool.
Um,
And you
yeah,
may be in a bad mood on occasion while stuck on a desert island, so it's good to have something like that.
yes, yeah. And I guess the honorable mention uh, for Brian E. Um, ambient album. It was like
Cool.
81. Yeah. Yeah. If I wasn't able to get uh, a copy of Dorothy Ashby.
Yeah.
Uh, but by the
Currently
time
out
I
of
was getting
stock.
stranded, Ambient 4 on land. That's it, 1982. Yeah, if it was out of stock before I was living on a desert island,
Yeah.
I have a copy of Ambient 4 online, so that would.
Okay. Cool. I mean, that's a great answer as well. I've been listening to music for airports quite a lot recently, and it's just a nice space to be in.
Oh yeah, check out Ambient 4. It's a little more of a darker territory, but
Cool.
it's just like he was just he's the guy who kind of invented ambient.
Yeah, yeah, he did. Yeah, I mean, he at least defined it and,
Sure,
really
he put
pinpointed
it
what
into a
it.
container for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Those were great answers. I endorse that trio, or yeah, technically 4 records.
Nice.
I think you'll yeah, I think you'll be all right on that
I'll
desert
be
island.
okay. Be okay. Yeah.
Um, cool, cool. Well, thank you so much, David. This has been really great. I've really, enjoyed hearing about your journey. Really appreciate all of the music that you have mentioned because I have a lot of new things to listen to, as do everybody, who will listen to this. Appreciate that. Um, for people who are tuning in, where can people check out your work, and your projects, your music, to get involved, or just keep track, of what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. My album is called Carrier, and it's out on all platforms: Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music. So if you search David Moses Carrier, you'll be able to find it there. I'm on Instagram. My handle is David Moses with 4 S's. Um, yeah, so I post updates there. Not as much as I should, but they're on there. I have cassettes too. Anyone who collects cassettes,
Cool.
free to order one. Uh, yeah, and I minted my first. It's called Undergrowth One on Zora, and planning on minting more of those just to start experimenting at spinning with. Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to listen.
Cool. I love that. And now that you've been on For the Record, who is another music head that you feel like might be interested in, going through the ringer, so to speak?
Oh, maybe I can try to get Mitchell on here.
Oh, that'd be great. Mitchell is Nanny
Mitchell Brown,
Cantaloupe, right?
Nanny Cantaloupe. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, that'd be
he's a
cool.
legend. Dude's
Uh,
a
That's
legend in
that's
the
another,
scene. So,
great artist name. This episode has also been full of great artist names, which I appreciate.
all right.
Um, cool. Well, yeah, thanks again, David. This has been really great. I really appreciated, your time and, your thoughts.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Be well, and be in touch.
Right on. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, man. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye.
All right. Bye.